Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm writing to Tathastu Unconditional Acceptance with Sanskrit hymns by Swami Tadatmananda. So, unconditional acceptance. I would assume that is very much bhakti yoga. Because if you have unconditional acceptance in terms of God, I think you will be essentially enlightened in that way. But Uh, Tathastu? Don't think I'm pronouncing that right. Anyways, let's go ahead and give this video a shot. If I can speak. From tragedy to tranquility.
Tathastu is an ancient Sanskrit expression formed from two words, astu, let it be, and tata, in such a manner. It's usually translated, let it be so, or so be it. When Janaka, the wise king of Mithila, was approached in his palace by destitute subjects who begged for his help, he replied, Tathastu. With these words, King Janaka granted their requests and instructed his ministers to provide for all their needs. Tathastu is also used to indicate unconditional acceptance of a particular situation. For example, when King Janaka was informed that his palace was on fire, he simply said, Tathastu. He accepted the situation unconditionally because the enlightened king had no attachment to his palace or to anything else. According to the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, unconditional acceptance of life's many difficulties is the key to complete freedom from suffering. Unconditional acceptance is the ability to embrace any experience, no matter how physically or emotionally painful it might be, but without feeling any hurt or sadness, without feeling disturbed or resentful, without wanting the situation to be different in any way whatsoever.
Now this right here, so this is what I thought it was about to be enlightened. Was the sheer fact that you do not suffer. I mean, while you can say your true self is enlightened, and his body suffers regardless, because it is part of Maya, which has suffering in it. But to say that even the body doesn't suffer, at least in terms of your emotions. Obviously, if you're in pain and you can somehow not show it, I mean, okay, fair enough. But I'm sure there's going to be a point to of unbearable pain where you will have to show that you are hurting. But emotional suffering, it's something that you could potentially overcome if you if you can have complete detachment. But that's what I thought enlightenment was. But then when I hear Swami Vivekananda, still crying, especially Sir Ramakrishna, where I mean he's considered to be enlightened, but then again, this is probably before he was enlightened, where he was crying at the feet of Kali, because begging for the mother to come back. Now I don't know if he's ever cried after that once he has realization. I don't know. I've not heard that he did or did not, but at least Swami Vivekananda, I think I've heard that he did. He is considered enlightened, but the body still suffers. I don't remember who said this. I think it's probably Swami Tadatmananda here who has said that while your true self doesn't suffer, but the body may still suffer from the world because it is part of the world. I mean, yeah. So again, I thought enlightenment was the fact that you don't suffer in this world, including even physical suffering. And but at the same time, by if you look at someone who's doing this, that is not suffering anything from the world, they would seem very, well, emotionless. Because I'm starting to realize, or maybe think that emotion is what Advaita Vedanta is trying to kind of, to some degree, trying to get away from, because that's where you suffer. Besides physical pain, I mean, physical pain is understandable, but emotional pain, like when you get rejected, when you didn't get what you want, when someone's yelling at you, or your friends don't like you anymore, or whatever it may be, it's all emotional. None of it's really physical. One, you're gonna look like a robot because like oh my castle's burning. So be it. Oh, I'm being robbed. So be it. Oh, you know, my wife left me. So be it. It's kind of like, do you even have emotions, or do you even care anymore? Caring is attachment. So do you care anymore? So, no. It's like, that's kind of like a robot to a lot of degrees. It seems cold.
Let's discuss how suffering can be overcome through unconditional acceptance. First of all, we have to understand the difference between pain and suffering. Suppose I have a really bad headache and I say to myself, "Oh, my head is throbbing. I feel so miserable, I can't stand it." Pain, in this case, is the excruciating sensation of throbbing inside my head and at my temples. Suffering, on the other hand, is how I happen to react to that pain by feeling irritated, distressed, or even tormented by the headache. Such reactions would make me feel even worse. But suppose I didn't react like that. If I could somehow accept the headache without reacting negatively, then I would not feel distressed or tormented by it. I would still feel the throbbing in my head, but without suffering because of it, without whining or complaining, without feeling disturbed at all. The same holds true for emotional pain. It's entirely possible to feel the terrible heartache of losing a loved one, but without feeling all the sorrow and grief that usually arises at times of loss and hangs on for a long time afterwards. But being free from grief and sorrow is possible only with unconditional acceptance of the loss. You can be completely free from suffering if your negative reactions, like sadness, hurt, anger, resentment, and so on, can somehow be replaced by unconditional acceptance. But how can you accept the non-stop throbbing of a bad headache or the terrible heartache of losing a loved one? That kind of acceptance is not a matter of choice. You can't simply decide to accept severe pain or terrible heartache. Fortunately, the teachings of Vedanta can lead you to discover how pain and heartache don't truly affect you in an essential way. They can't affect your true self, your fundamental nature as pure consciousness, as we'll discuss shortly. By discovering your true divine nature, Atma, it's possible to remain completely undisturbed and perfectly content even when your head is pounding or your heart is breaking.
Hmm.
Vedanta's solution to the problem of suffering is twofold. First is to understand the inevitability of pain and heartache, which afflict us all. Anyone who has a head is subject to headaches, and anyone who has emotions is subject to heartaches. Understanding the inevitability of pain and heartbreak is absolutely necessary to avoid a common but really miserable kind of suffering. that suffering is usually expressed with the words, "Why me? Why did this happen to me?" So many people are tormented by those thoughts when they're diagnosed with cancer or another serious illness. But the fact is, the mutations that create malignant cancer cells are natural. Really speaking, every kind of illness can be said to be natural in the sense that it arises according to the laws of nature and the laws of karma. When you clearly understand the fact that illness is both natural and inevitable, then instead of asking, "Why me?" you will instead be able to ask, "Why not me? Am I so special that I should somehow be exempted or immune to the problems that can afflict everyone else?"
So this is what I was talking about understanding. If you can understand certain things, not just about, of course, the pain, but why reason things happens to you. I'm not saying it's going to make you enlightened, but it'll hopefully enable you to understand why it happened, and hopefully when you understand why it happened, it can reduce the suffering. I That's something that I've been using since, I guess, during that time in college. I keep telling the story about uh, how I how I reduce my suffering, how Buddhism said that life is suffering, and because of that, I have decided not to suffer in life. And how I not suffer in life is by understanding, being one of the things. If I understand why, I usually don't suffer it, or at least I reduce the suffering.
In addition to understanding the inevitability of pain and heartache, Vedanta's solution to the problem of suffering has a second part that's even more important. Much of Vedanta's teachings are focused on the practice of self inquiry, a practice called Atma Vichara. The goal of this practice is to discover your true divine nature, your true self, Atma. With the help of Vedantic teachings, you can eventually discover that your true nature is unborn, uncreated, vast, boundaryless, and utterly unaffected by the problems of your body, mind, and the world around you. That practice has been described at great length in many of my other videos, so we won't dwell on it here. The ultimate outcome of the practice of self-inquiry is an extraordinary transformation of how you see yourself in relationship to your own body and mind. First of all, you come to understand that, in essence, you are a conscious being completely independent of your body. You abide inside your body, seeing the images that fall upon your eyes, hearing the sounds that reach your ears, and commanding the movements of your limbs. In this way, you come to understand that your body is just a vehicle for you, like a car. After you buy a new car, you drive it around, you fill it with fuel, and you get it repaired as required. In the same way, after you're born with a new body, you move it around, you feed it, and you get medical treatment as required. When an old car can no longer be repaired, you buy a new one. So too, when your old body can no longer be kept alive through medical treatments, you drop it at the time of death and acquire a new one. according to your karma. The practice of self-inquiry not only transforms your relationship with your body, but it also transforms your relationship with your mind. You ultimately discover that you are ever-present, unchanging consciousness. The consciousness that reveals everything that happens in your mind, like your thoughts and emotions. As pure consciousness, whatever happens in your mind does not truly affect you, the awareful witness or conscious observer, called Sakshi. Like sunlight isn't affected by anything it happens to shine upon, in the same way, the so-called light of consciousness reveals your thoughts and emotions without being affected by them in any way whatsoever. This is Vedanta's twofold solution to the problem of suffering. First, knowing the inevitability of pain and heartache, and second, radically transforming your relationship with your body and mind. These realizations can lead you to a state of unconditional acceptance, a state of enlightenment in which you remain utterly untouched by suffering. A wonderful example of unconditional acceptance is found towards the end of the great epic Mahabharata. After the bloody war between the Kauravas and Pandavas came to an end, all 100 sons of King Dhritarashtra and Queen Gandhari lay dead on the battlefield. The king requested Sri Krishna to comfort and console Gandhari, who was holding the lifeless body of her eldest son, Duryodhana, in her arms. Gandhari was overcome by grief, and she falsely accused Sri Krishna of deliberately allowing the war to take place when he should have prevented it. Her deep anguish drove Gandhari to curse Sri Krishna and his entire clan to be killed, like her sons had been killed. In response to her curse, Sri Krishna spoke to her tenderly, without a trace of anger on his face, saying, "All of us will certainly die, according to our own karma." Not surprisingly, Sri Krishna unconditionally accepted Gandhari's curse. Okay, sometimes teachings like these can be conveyed in a tremendously powerful way when they're expressed in poems or songs, because poetry and music speaks directly to our hearts, to our emotions. It's not surprising that Adi Shankara and other great teachers composed deeply emotional hymns in praise of many different deities. A few years ago, I composed a Sanskrit hymn on unconditional acceptance, a hymn in praise of Ishvara as Vidhata. Vidhata is a name for the Supreme Being who governs the universe with his infinite intelligence, and who determines the laws of nature and the laws of karma. The hymn is called Vidhata Shatkam, a set of 6 verses in praise of Vidhata. To make it more accessible, I also composed an English translation that follows the meter of the original so that it can be chanted or sung in the same way as the Sanskrit. The English refrain says, "This world was thus fashioned by you, Tathastu. The refrain praises Ishvara, who is manifest as the intelligent order that governs the universe. And with the word Tathastu, the hymn expresses our unconditional acceptance of that divine order. Each of its 6 verses describes an aspect of that order by depicting one of the many cycles or patterns that regularly occur in our lives. I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, actually, I'm going to pause it there. So if you want to hear it, you have to go to the channel. There should be a link in the description. So anyways, yeah, that's the thing. That I did realize the unconditional surrender portion, where if you can, like, and that's the thing I've also talked about since roughly the beginnings, that the 2 things you can do. If you cannot do anything about it, then why worry? There's nothing you can do about it. So essentially, you're accepting that you can't do anything about it and accept whatever outcome comes about. 2, if you can do something about it, then there's 2 things you can do. Either not do anything about it or do something about it. If you're not going to do anything about it, then you should accept the outcome of the results because you chose not to do anything about it. If you can do something about it, then take action, do something about it, but then accept the outcomes of that as well because you chose to take action as well. Of course, do the best that you can, but you have at the end results, you're still gonna have to accept the outcome of it. Now, don't get me wrong, you may not like it, but you could always say, maybe next time I could improve upon it. I could do better. Kind of like a test, It's like, well, didn't quite do so good this time around, but I know in the next test I could do better. So that's about accepting and understanding. Accept the outcomes. If there's nothing you can do about it, then the only thing you can really do is just accept the outcomes of it. Why worry about it? If you can do something about it and you choose not to, then again, same thing. Why worry about it? You're choosing not to do anything about it, so you must accept the outcomes. And then if there is something you can do about it and you choose to do something about it, then guess what? You can alternate. You can, I'll say alternate, but you can exact your, I guess your, not free will, but you can make changes to it. Whatever changes you can make, do the best you can with it, and then accept the results. So yeah, these are the things that I've kind of understood and I've said in the very beginning, which I'm glad it's kind of brought up. It has been brought up in at least some of the videos that I reacted to about this. That understanding, it's been brought up maybe a few times, and then the about the fact that whether you can or cannot do something about certain things. It all depends on the situation, of course. So this is my reaction to Tathastu Unconditional Acceptance. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up the sound down below. Thanks for watching. I will see you.